progress. All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. There are 5 of us present. I believe that is enough for us to get started. So welcome, everybody. I'll call the meeting to order. Mary, can you do the roll call?
Burnett, Carter.
Here.
Neal,
Here.
Asalakwa, Patterson, Paul, Smeltzer, Thorsland,
Here.
Yukon.
All right, there is, Mary, I will say there is one person that is on as an attendee that's just a phone number. I honestly have no idea if that is Mrs. Stephanie, because she did indicate she was going to join via Zoom. I don't know if that's her or not. It's actually unlabeled on my end, so. Could the person that's online or on their phone at phone number?
Hey, I think that's me. I just unmuted. My name's Tyler Evans, and I'm with Stratus Networks. I'm the attendee that joined by phone.
Tyler, we appreciate that. We were just trying to sort through one person from our task force that we knew was going to be on Zoom, just trying to sort through that and make sure that wasn't them so that we had the proper attendance. So thank you, Tyler.
I understood, no problem.
All right. We had the agenda and the addendum was sent out to you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Eric makes the motion. Is there a second? Samantha? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, public participation. I have 2 public participation slips here. You're right. I'm sorry. We did the agenda and I just kept going. How about the minutes from our last meeting, March 21st? Again, those were posted. Is there a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Motion's made by Mr. Smeltzer. Is there a second? MC, a second on that. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, the same sign. The minutes are approved as well. Now we'll move to public participation. I have 2 slips here for people that would want to speak. We'll start off with Rick Harnish. So Rick, you move up there. Yep.
Can you hear me all right? Yeah, my name is Rick Harnish. I'm the Director of Development for excuse me, NextLink Internet. First off, I'd like to congratulate the county on developing this broadband task force. I think you're a leader in the state from our research, and it's a good thing you're doing. Second, I'd also like to congratulate you on selecting Finley Engineering and CCG Consulting. I know that was a tough process, and you picked 2 very reputable firms. So NextLink Internet, we're also known as AMG Investment or Investment Group, and we were the largest winner in the Connect America Fund Phase 2 grant from the FCC to the tune of $281 million. Some of that was in Illinois. It was in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and Illinois. Most of our Connect America funds was in the northwest part of Illinois, from Peoria west and north. In the RDOF funding program, we were 6th place to the tune of $429 million, and those awards go from like Vincennes, Indiana, kind of takes a 2/3 swath through Illinois, kind of avoids the Chicago area and down in the St. Louis market and far south Illinois. We don't have any funding there. We're a presumptive winner. It has not been authorized yet. It has received authorization from the engineering staff at the FCC. It's basically sitting on the commissioner's desk right now, waiting to be approved. And then we also plan on investing another 400 billion, and total $1 billion we're going to invest in those states that I previously mentioned. Our growth since we started in 2012 in Texas, out west of Fort Worth. But in 2019, we had 195 employees, and we are nearing 1,000 employees today. So in those COVID years, the last couple of years, we've grown exponentially. We've also opened 26 field offices across those states. We've made 20 acquisitions, 4 of which are in Illinois. We participate in the EBB program and the ACP program, which basically is a discount program so people can get their internet at a cheaper cost. The ACP program, I think, is $30 off your bill if you qualify for the program. We partnered with Eastern Illini Electric Cooperative, which is a local your electric provider, at least in the northern part of the county. And we are building 500 miles of fiber to connect all their substations together. And at those substations, we will be installing monopoles in which to supply fiber, wireless broadband initially, and hopefully fiber in the future. Additionally, on those monopoles will be the AMI equipment, so the electric co-ops can automatic meter reading, get all that information from the consumers' homes electronically. And we are going to install IoT, Internet of Things base station on all those towers as well. That will enable smart farming, and other IoT type devices would be able to transmit as well. Such things as like propane tank monitors and stuff like that, so that propane companies can know when somebody's propane tank's running out of gas. There's lots of uses in IoT. That's the thing of probably the next 10 years is you're going to see so many smart devices being used. We hire locally and we train all staff. We'll be hiring a lot of people to install fiber, install wireless, and that type of thing. Our average salary is $71,500. That's salary and benefits. Nextlink has a 4.8 out of 5 Google rating, and that's with 10,000 reviews. We think that's pretty phenomenal for an internet service provider. Our CAF obligations, we're committed to the FCC to install or to provide service, and we are 40% done with those obligations. We're obligated to do speed testing on all the connections, and in Illinois, that amounts to 15,000 locations and $35 million. In the RDOF program, 67,000 locations and $193 million in Illinois, and that amounted to $2,800 per location. As I said, we have the FCC approval to build gigabit service, and that's what we bid on in the RDOF program. And that's a hybrid design, fiber and wireless. We peer directly with Google, Amazon, Akamai, Facebook, Netflix, YouTube. What's that mean? That means all the internet traffic stays local. So at one of our data centers, we have their servers located. It doesn't have to go to Los Angeles or wherever those companies are located to get that content. It's right here locally. We also spent, I heard Sean Middleton say in the meeting last week that they do have a concern about spectrum. We bought $28 million worth of spectrum licenses in the CBRS auction across the states. here in Champaign County, I don't think we have any, but we can acquire them. In Champaign County, we were awarded or will be awarded $4.25 million to serve between 1,500 and 1,800 locations, I believe. Also, to finish up in the Connect Illinois grants, the NOFO 3, the initial grant period just ended last Thursday. We filled out 2 applications, one north of you and one just to the east of you, although there is a portion of Champaign County in that application, a small portion. And one thing about Sean's presentation last week, and I know he's online, and I don't think he'll take this bad, but I did hear him talking about spectrum. One thing that was not brought up is the opening of the 6 megahertz or 6 gigahertz spectrum. That's between 600 and 800 megahertz of spectrum that's going to be, it is opened up. They're waiting on the database to be finalized, but it should be opened up this year. That's a tremendous amount of spectrum that will be available for local companies, for our company, for anybody to use. That amount of spectrum, you can get gigabit services, multi-gigabit services wirelessly. So the good thing about all that is you got better days coming for broadband, whether it's wireless, whether it's fiber. Wireless can be deployed very quickly. Obviously, fiber takes some time. It takes a lot more money to install fiber. That doesn't mean we're not going to do it. We're going to install fiber and wireless so that people can get the services right away, very fast services right away, and then morph into fiber, as more funding comes available. You got the Infrastructure Act that will be starting to be released probably in early 2024. So that's additional funding. So I've been in this industry for 27 years. I've never seen this kind of funding come into broadband. I started as a farmer. I built broadband on my farm in 1997. And this is just an amazing time. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. And again, congratulations on what you're doing.
Rick, thanks for your comments. I'm sure we may have questions or comments later,
sure.
but we'll move on to our next person that submitted a public participation slip, Jason Young. Jason, you were with us a couple of weeks ago, so.
Yes, thank you very much. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to address the task force. As you said, my name is Jason Young. I'm with Volo Internet and Tech. We are a local fiber and wireless provider in this area. We've appreciated the task force making the full report available. In reviewing that report, one thing we want to make sure that is on record and included in our thoughts is the inclusion of local businesses within this program, within this task force. We have endeavored, and local businesses have endeavored, to bring high quality fiber and wireless internet services to our residents in Champaign County for over 20 years. We are actively involved in rural expansion projects right now, and those capital monies are coming directly from our pockets and the residents of those individual areas where we are expanding fiber services to. So again, to reiterate, we would very much appreciate the opportunity, inclusion in the way in which the RFPs are drafted to ensure that local businesses who have been supported this endeavor and have been champions of it for 20 years continue to be included. We do not come empty-handed. We do come with resources and opportunities, grassroots campaigns that have been successful, and also portfolios and ideas that have worked in this area, and knowing our residents and knowing our neighbors. So we very much appreciate, again, the opportunity to address the task force, and thank you very much for the thoughts and inclusion of involving local business.
Thank you, Jason. We sure appreciate it. We do have a number of people online. Is there anybody that is online that would like to speak during public comment period?
Yeah, if I may, if you can hear me, this is Tyler Evans with Stratus Networks.
Yeah, Tyler. So repeat that again. You said Tyler Evans Stratus Network, correct?
Correct. Yes, I'm the Director of Business Strategy for Stratus Networks. If I could have a few minutes of your time, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely, Tyler. It's all you.
All right. So I don't know what you know about Stratus. I'll start from the beginning a little bit. We were founded about 20 years ago, headquartered in Peoria Heights, Illinois. The two 50-50 owners at the time came from previous telecom backgrounds from the big guys, being AT&T, and saw the red tape and the inefficient processes and procedures and thought that they could do it better. So at the time, the name of the company was Access to Go. They spun that up again out of Peoria Heights. At the time, we were just purely an aggregator of services. So we would go out to the CenturyLinks and AT&Ts and Comcasts of the world, and we would buy services and resell those to strictly enterprise customers, no residential customers. That was really successful for a long time. Customers appreciated having one number to call with a problem, one bill that they'd receive, and just someone answering the phone when they called in with a technical issue. So some of our first customers were the likes of OSF and Unity Point and Morton Community Bank and the Busey banks. Really, our bread and butter was the healthcare and financial institutions locally in the area. That's how our book of business was built. After about 10 years, we had a large enough customer base that it made sense to start laying our own network in the ground. So we started our sister company, Stratus Construction, around 2008, I want to say. And we built out our own wholly owned fiber network throughout, starting in Peoria Heights again, but now throughout the majority of at least central Illinois and a lot of the further reaches of Illinois as well. So some of our biggest markets today would be Peoria, Springfield, Bloomington, Galesburg, in the Rockford area. Ownership is still local. One of the founders of the company lives in Peoria. He's a fourth generation Peorian. I myself live in Pekin. I've lived here all my life. Our CTO lives in Bloomington, Illinois, so he's local as well, and he's lived there all of his life. So all the support we provide is local. We really care about the communities that we're providing services in. We make it a point, to be involved in the chambers of commerce and be involved in charity events and hosting outings and really getting to know the communities that we serve. So today, our network has grown. We've built this, again, wholly owned, wholly buried, no aerial fiber network throughout a lot of central Illinois. We recently took on an investor at the end of last year who's injected some capital into the business. Seeing how well the business vertical has done, it felt like a good time and it made sense to start identifying some residential opportunities. And so what we're looking for today is communities who want to partner with a provider like Stratus, who has we feel, the best reputation in the area. We hope that our customers would say the same. We service a good number, I want to say 30, 40, 50 customers in the Champaign-Urbana area today, including the universities. And we want to make our product available to unserved and underserved residential addresses. And we're looking for engagement from communities who are looking for a partnership like that. Our plan is to bring fiber to every home up to a gigabit of speed at a market competitive rate. And if there are some economically depressed areas that, for whatever reason, other providers haven't taken the time to put some attention on, we also want to make sure that they have access to broadband as everyone should. So we're willing to work with any communities who want that kind of partnership. And that's why I'm speaking here today. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Tyler. We sure appreciate your input and introducing yourself to our task force. Was there anybody else that appears to be online that would like to speak during public participation? I do not hear anybody, so we will move on. Communications. Is there any communications with the committee or for the committee? I see none. So we'll move on to new business. Before we do that, I do want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Darlene, there is a meeting following this. What would you advise us as a task force to be our absolute positive we have to be done by adjourned?
We need to be finished by 6:20 so that we can arrange the room for the next meeting.
All right, so I said that just so we're all clear. 6:20, when that hits, mid-sentence, it'll be, we're done, everybody. And that's as far as we're going to go at 6:20. So 6:20 it is. So the first agenda item is we kind of did this last, at our last meeting where we really got an overview of the entire report. However, Finley really charged us and laid out some decision points that we as a task force have to make. And those are really on pages 13 through 20. What I want to do here tonight is start off with Doug Dawson. Doug Dawson is with CCG Consulting. And Doug really, as Sean Middleton last meeting indicated, Doug did a lot of the writing. What I really want to do is kind of wrap up and see if Doug would like to add anything. I'm sure he's had time to read the minutes of what we did talk about and visit with Sean, who's also online. But kind of any more questions, any more comments from the report as we kind of wrap up that initial overview of the report. So Doug, I'll turn it over to you. And of course, Sean, you're on, either one of you can speak up. But again, let's kind of wrap up the overview of the report before we start talking about some of the decision points. So Doug, is there anything else that you'd like to point out or highlight for this meeting?
Well, not a whole lot, because the document that comes after this, you've already sort of laid out some next steps to talk about. So I think that's where most of the time probably needs to go this evening. What's really important, I'm working with about a half a dozen other counties, and the challenge of going from this report to action is really quite a pile of work. And so getting yourself organized to wade through these questions is a lot harder than it sounds, because you not only have to decide what's the best approach for each one of these different items, but also gain consensus. I think that's where you need to put all of your focus, because it's very easy to get distracted and go, well, we must talk to ISPs, but you're not really ready to do that until you first know what you want to talk to them about. And so I'm very much in favor of a step-by-step approach. I'm working with other counties to do that. So what I will say to you is that, if after one or two more of these meetings, you find yourself bogging down, what I would suggest to you, which is something you may already be thinking about doing, but it might be worthwhile to take some of these questions off to subcommittees who then tackle that one or two questions and then come back to report to this committee, because a subcommittee can dig in deeper, talk the pros and cons, do all that kind of stuff, and sort of come to you with the synthesis of it all, rather than all the giant detail that you have to wade through. So that's what I see other counties doing, is breaking these tasks into 2 or 3 or 4 pieces and then giving those to different subcommittees to tackle. It seems to be a very effective way to do it, because it's a giant pile of work. And I know all the folks on this committee are sort of volunteers, and so none of you have enough time to only do this. So that is what that's what I've been finding lately, is the manpower needed to tackle the questions. As far as, I think that Sean gave a very good summary. And so I don't really need to talk about, what these pages say. I think they're fairly self-explanatory. I'd be glad to answer any questions anybody has. And I think that we actually hit all of these topics when we follow up with the document that follows this one here. So I think that's probably the place to dig into them. So I'm certainly open to anything you want to say. So my recommendation is, let's figure out a way to get organized as quickly as we can, because you have quite a bit of work in front of you. Lastly, we have a lot of time, believe it or not. It doesn't feel like it, but I think that the very earliest date that we're probably going to see grants out of the giant $42 billion BEAD program would be mid next summer, and that's optimistic. I don't think it'll be that fast. There's a whole lot of things that the state and the NTIA have to go through to get there. And so, there's plenty of time to get this plan, but the months are going to slip away if you're not careful. So. Finally, I would just want to iterate what the one guy said. You guys are ahead of most other people, so you really need to be congratulated. Most counties haven't even started to ask the questions yet.
So is there any questions? Again, we're talking the broad report. Let's not get into the 5 sections there. Is there any questions for Doug, again, on the broad report itself that you may have may not recall from the last meeting's presentation, or you thought of a question that night on your way home that, oh my gosh, I want to ask that question? Is there anything else, again, in broad terms on the report that you'd like to know? Mike?
Hi, Doug. This is Mike Smeltzer. We talked about 10 years ago.
We did, Mike. How you doing?
Good. Something I was playing with this afternoon was the concept, or trying to figure out a way of dealing with the complication of RDOF. And we have an RDOF winner with us tonight, so don't think of yourself as a complication, but it is a complication to our planning. The lesson I took away from Lafayette, Louisiana, was that until they pledged to do the entire city, sooner or later, they couldn't get the political support to get it done. And I'm thinking if we leave part of Champaign County to the will of whatever the RDOF winners happen to be, and just do part of it or plan to do part of it, that it's going to be hard to put together a political and an emotional coalition to go out and spend a whole lot of money to do that. And so I started playing with numbers that looked at, all right, you had a quote, a number for doing the whole county, and how much of that was the RDOF area. So I just did some subtraction to figure that out. But it would seem to me that if we are going to go after grant funds to do the non-RDOF areas, we probably need to have a parallel plan that uses ISP money and county money to fund the non-RDOF areas. So we're sure they have fiber and that they're part of the same system or the same overall plan, so it's not quite so piecemeal. Does that make any sense to you?
The answer is yes, it does. And it is a dilemma. And the reason it's a dilemma is not because, it's very good that the FCC is going to give money away for the RDOF. But when you look at the map, it's I call it a Swiss cheese. There's holes in it, there's gaps in it. And so, normally in the past, grants have been for very coherent, areas, all contiguous. You built that area, there's a border where the grants stop, but these are all just, there's grant areas, non-RDOF, RDOF, non-RDOF, and they're all mixed together. And it makes for a very big challenge for anybody that wants to build the non-RDOF areas. And so the FCC and every county who has RDOF is just wrangling with this, because it's not an easy question of how do you get everyone served. The RDOF is a complication, is your correct answer. So, and of course, hopefully that gets resolved. It really becomes a problem if the year goes on and the FCC doesn't make that choice. If they award or don't award the RDOF either way, then we have a clear path, right? But if they, if it just stays open as the clock keeps ticking, it's going to get very nerve-wracking, because it's like, well, what solution is it that we're looking for here? And so what other states are doing, Steve, is they are, a lot of the states are going, look, the RDOF areas, just because somebody won it doesn't mean that they're going to get everything. And so they're also talking about giving matching grants for RDOF and non-RDOF, maybe not to the same degree, but they want to make sure everybody gets what they want to get, right? And so I think that, until that's awarded, we sort of have to say, here's our plan. If it's awarded, here's our plan. If it's not awarded, and then hopefully that resolves itself. But you're absolutely right. When we start talking about issuing an RFI here, what is it that we're asking for, right? Because nobody knows whether the RDOF areas are awarded yet. So it is absolutely a complication, and you're probably not going to make any actual awards of the county's ARPA money until that is resolved, because you're not quite sure what your solution is. But I think that we can start in our report. We did just what you said. We've quantified all the various areas, And so I think that you can start having reasonable discussions of both scenarios so that you're ready for when that happens. So it certainly adds a whole nother layer of complexity and you even picking what you want to do next. So, but we can't ignore it, that's for sure, because in your county, there's a huge amount of area covered by the RDOF. So.
From a financial point of view, how much of a percentage of the total project, of a federal project, we're going to be asking for 75% funding, but if the county and local ISPs are going to be working together, how much of that should be county money for NTIA or for Department of Commerce in Illinois to say, yeah, the county's got some skin in the game? 5%, 10% of the total project, 20%? I mean, what are they looking for from local government, or what do you think is a reasonable percentage to shoot for?
Unfortunately, it's not as simple as a percentage. It really comes down to, I believe, when it all comes down to it, it's going to come down to cost per passing. And so, if you have a place where it's $20,000 per passing, they're going to want more local match than if it's $10,000 per passing. And so I think it's much more of related to that. I mean, the federal awards, which are not really federal, they're going to be awarded by the state broadband office. Hopefully they give us a whole lot of direction in there long before those grants come out. They have to file a plan later this year, a preliminary plan, and then later next year they file a final plan. And hopefully that detail, because they can define that. State broadband grants could say we're looking for 5 or 10% matching. So if they give us any direction, it'll become clear. If they don't give us direction, then we're going to want to go up and talk to those folks a lot, before you award this money, to know how they view it, because they're the ultimate ones going to give this grant out, right? And so you don't want to necessarily give your grant money out until we know it's going to be effective. So that they're another piece of the puzzle, is what do they have in mind? Because at the end of the day, they're going to get probably $1 billion to give away. That's a lot of money, but we got to make sure that we are doing your stuff in a way that you get your share of it. So,
thank you.
Other questions for Doug? Again, we're on the general portion still. We will get into the details here in a bit, but any other questions as we talk about the report in broad terms as kind of follow-ups from our last meeting? I don't see any, Doug. I'm sure we may have further questions for you as we kind of keep moving. So if we keep moving, then I kind of move on to that second part there of new business, A.2, which is the memo that came from Darlene and Mary Ellen. Darlene, Mary Ellen, would the two of you like to comment on anything, or is there anything you to comment on, or do you feel you covered that?
We prepared the memo with the idea to try to outline some of the major points that we saw as we read through the report, just to try to simplify the conversation for you all. So that was the report that was in your packet. So some of the major sort of decision points as we saw them, and Doug can certainly tell us if we missed any major ones.
I can tell you, I think that's a great outline. I like it. So, yep.
All right, then. I know Doug talked about, really, to me, within this document, there are 5 main decision points there that are identified. And again, I agree with Doug. This is a great way to take those 13 through 20 pages and kind of putting them down to 2 pages. And so there is 5 major decision points, and within some of these, there's additional decisions. And I understand what Doug talked about of some of these are pretty big decisions, and perhaps we need some subcommittees. I'd like to take a stab at it of us working through it as a whole first. I'm not saying we won't get to that and might realize, boy, we're making no progress here. But I'd like to try to work through this as a whole and try at least for a period of time here. So if we do, the first question talks about determine which model is most favorable for the county. And again, what I'd like to do is just work 1 through 5 on these, and if we'll get through as many as we can tonight. So you can see that, that there's several options that Finley and Doug from CCG laid out, and again, are kind of summarized there or laid out what those are. Why don't we start with that? A discussion on that. Anybody have some thoughts, some comments on those? I'll open it up to anybody. Mike?
I'll start by putting in a vote for C in that category there, a public-private partnership. In order for this to be organized and again, make sure we get to the full county, there needs to be one organization that's doing the grants and making sure that everyone's taken care of. And no offense to any ISPs, but writing a federal grant is a big deal. And coming up with the funding for it and doing it. And even if we work with 6 different ISPs, there's nothing to guarantee that those 6 different ISPs are all going to be equally persuasive or successful in getting a grant. If the county is the grant writer, and we now have a grant writer, I think that helps a lot towards getting it done. Now, if the county applies for the grant, then the county processes the money and all that, the county ends up owning the infrastructure, but there's nothing to say that the county can't immediately lease that out or have pre-IRUs arranged with the ISPs to use that fiber, and that's where the local funding comes from. That's the formula we used for UC2B. We pre-arranged IRUs, and that raised all of our local funds, and so there are 7 or 8 different companies now are using that fiber in Champaign-Urbana, including the city and the county and the university and so forth. So I think having a central control, if you will, on how this all gets put together, and that doesn't necessarily have to be the county, but I think the county is the logical entity to do that for the county. So I like option C.
All right. Other comments? Eric?
Well, there's a lot of fundamental agreement with me and Mike. However, as we can see, the consultant recommendation was the retail model. And maybe while we have some experts online who put that recommendation together, if they could explain briefly for us the pros and cons of the retail versus the public-private, in their opinion.
Doug, I think Eric's got a great point. Doug, why don't you talk a little bit about the differences, the similarities, and let's just be honest, the challenges with both approaches.
Yeah, so let me talk about what I meant by recommending that one. You know, this recommendation was because of the fact that this is probably going to be grant funded. If this was not grant funded, I may have come up with a totally different recommendation. But one of the challenges if you look at the size of the funding that has to be raised, one of the challenges for whoever writes the grants is going to have to come up with the matching funds. And so, you know, and I kind of agree with what Steve just said. What if there's, you know, what if it is 5 or 6 or 7 different ISPs that carve up different pieces of the county? You know, it's much easier for them to each come up with their matching funds than to try to do it as a group. These can both work. So I don't have a strong preference, but you know, it all comes down to funding of which of these sounds like the easier way to get funded. And so at the end of the day, the product you get is the same. But you know, it gets to go back to something that Steve raised in the earlier question, RDOF really complicates the heck out of this because the other ISPs who might want to play in this don't get these nice coherent grant areas. That might lend yourself more to the public-private model. You know, what a lot of other counties are doing is they're coming through and saying, I don't really know which of these is the best. One of the biggest questions they ask in the RFI is to ask the ISPs their opinion, because they're the other half of the equation of the partner with you. You know, because they play in both A and C, right? So as to ask them how they would play there, and their responses might lean you towards one or the other. But at the end of the day, they can both get you to the same place. The question is, which of those two paths seem to be the easiest to get funded? Now, I do agree with what Steve just said. Let's say there is 7 grant requests. What if only 5 of them get awarded? Then we have 2 chunks of the county that don't get a broadband solution. That would certainly lead you towards the C solution. But what we also don't know, because there's really this is a 3-legged stool, the third leg being the grant office. Which of those 2 would they prefer? So I think it's too early to pick one, but I think you can do your RFI in such a way that you gather enough facts that I always say, let the numbers and the facts speak for themselves. Find out which of those models seems to be the most coherent way to get everybody served. So, when I said I preferred A, it was by a hair. So this was not a strong preference. So the answer is, what's the path that gets this done to everybody's satisfaction? And I don't think you have enough facts on the table to pick one. There's good arguments to be made for both. And so, I have an idea that the retail model probably brings more matching funds. The trouble with the county doing it all is the ISPs may not be all that anxious to put their own money into that pile of a network owned by the county. So that's the downside of that model, is the county might have to find all of the matching. In Model A, they might bring all the matching except how much you contribute. And so, and the answer is neither one of those may be completely true. And so the question is, how do we get that matching? That might lead you towards one of these 2 answers. That's not a very definitive answer for you, but I think it all comes down to what's the easiest to fund. So,
Doug, there's a lot of smiles on this end when you said that was not a very definitive answer. I think there was some, you did not provide.
But the answer is, you don't have enough facts to pick A versus C yet, but you haven't. But the questions to ask to help you answer A and C. So,
Darlene.
So from that, the question would be, we're beginning to get requests to provide support letters for different ISPs. So is there risk at doing, we don't necessarily know what we want to support yet. So I'm not signing any support letters yet. Is that, the strategy would be, they may just go ahead and apply without our support for whatever things they're applying for. So I'm inquiring about the pros and cons of that.
well, the problem we have is there's not just one giant grant coming. There's also these little grants in between, right? And so, if you don't support them and that makes a difference of them not getting the money, that's a piece of the county that doesn't get solved. What you're going to find is, in a county of your size, it may take 11 grants to get it all. And some of the ones are the ones they're asking for support letters now. So they do a little pocket with one of those grants, and then we take it off the table because it's been solved, right? And so, it's the problem is, not only do you support them, but do you support what it is they're doing? You don't just automatically sign a letter of support unless you believe what it is they're asking for. And so it's kind of going to come down to, further down on your list here is, what is it that you want? Because you've got the RDOF winner who's going to build fiber backbone supporting wireless. Other ISPs we already heard from 2 tonight who want to build fiber directly. So, part of the decision of supporting grants is, what is it that you're trying to get to? So I personally wouldn't support a grant unless I believed both in the company and in what it is they want to build. But you also don't want to withhold approval for somebody who's put a good idea on the table that you think is a good idea. So those little current state grants and the smaller federal grants do get people served, and that's the end. That's your goal. If you could get 500 people taken care of before the federal grants get here, why would we not do that, right? So.
My opinion is, again, I'm a little hesitant to sign on to a whole bunch of people that are just asking for a letter of support until we're a few more steps down the path. I think that anybody that's contacted you, Darlene, or shared express interest in us giving them a support. Again, I'm not sure we're quite there yet. I'm not saying we'll never get there, but I'm just not sure. I agree. I'm not sure we're ready to sign on to anybody's project quite yet when we've got a lot of decisions to make ourselves. So, Mike?
Doug, is there some path by which the county could incentivize our RDOF winner that's here tonight that talked about doing fiber to wireless in the short term, but fiber to the farm in the long term, to speed up that process, or just skip the wireless process and use some of our ARPA funds to move them along to a more happy place for us?
Absolutely. Money solves everything, Mike. I think that I would be shocked if they wouldn't be willing to have that conversation. Again, it's hard to have it generically. And so you have to start getting, what we'll be talking about the RFI in a while, but part of the thing in the RFI is for ISPs to come back to you and tell you what they want. And hopefully they would come back and open that dialogue by giving you a proposal. So the answer is sure. Why would we not want to speed that up?
So we would want the RFI to be broad enough to allow them to participate, come back and say, yes, for X amount of dollars, we can do all the areas that we've already, won. We'll build fiber there because we already have backbone there.
Right. So yes, and lots of other counties are having that conversation. The RDOF player is clearly, they haven't won yet, but they, if what he said was true, that the engineering folks have bought off on it, they probably will be awarded. So having them as a player in this is absolutely essential, because they've already, it's unlikely if they are awarded that, probably these federal grants aren't going to give any more money to those areas. So you're the only one who could add it to it. So.
Samantha?
I can't hear her. I can't hear you, Samantha.
Sorry, Doug.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
there you go. No
I
problem.
was just wondering about the maps that stated the RDOF funded areas and non-funded areas. I was wondering, is that something I overlooked, or was that distributed?
Doug, what page was that on in the report? That map is in the report.
It's in the report. Hey, give me a second here and I'll find it for you.
Not be anything that was handed out tonight,
Okay.
unless you have.
I'll give you the page numbers here in a second. So
In there.
Okay.
yeah, that's a big report. It takes a while to find it. Let's see here.
Those, let me see how I can word this. Because I kind of see where he's coming from as far as getting forward, giving those commitment letters to those certain areas. If it was on that map, those areas that are committing to, let me make sure.
Yeah, the RDOF is on page 77, the map. And there are 3 winners. AMG is the big one, who we heard from this evening. There's Connect Everyone, which is a company called Starry. And then there's LTT Broadband, has a few little dots.
If she waits, would that funding still be available? I guess is the question that I'm trying to ask. So if she's not giving an answer or a letter of commitment to partner with those ISPs, right? Would that funding no longer be available at a certain time period?
Doug, I think you addressed this, or Rick Harnish, who's here, has awarded those. Rick stated that it's not been received final approval yet. In other words, they do not have the money in the bank for the RDOF funds. What is the time? And the hope is, and again, Rick or Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I heard this, in the next 30 days, 60 days, hopefully very soon, the confirmation will come. But what is the time frame then that, if it is awarded, that those funds have to be expended? You indicated the clock ticking, but refresh our memory, and maybe this gets to Samantha's point of what type of urgency is there.
If the RDOF is awarded right now, then AMG has 5 years to build all of the infrastructure starting next year, starting the year after the date of the award. That doesn't mean they can't go faster. And we already see a lot of RDOF companies just jumping into it because they want to start generating revenue, right? But on the books, they have 5 years, and there's certain points where they have to go 20%, 40%, 60%. And I don't have that. I don't remember that exactly, but there is a maximum or minimum amount of time they have to do certain things. So it's a pretty long timeline. So now what they really plan to do is something that if they are awarded, then you could be having a conversation with Rick and his folks and see what their thoughts are. So they probably don't know yet because they haven't been awarded. So.
In other words, Samantha, I think what Doug's saying, there are checkpoints within that 5-year period for certain
Yep.
things accomplished or benchmarks for them to hit. Does that get close to your question or lays the groundwork for your question?
A little bit. Ms. Darlene, if you can explain to us what you're receiving.
So the question would be the process of the grant writing. So let's say Illinois Connect grant comes out now. There's 2 or 3 ISPs that would like to apply for that money. They're hoping to get a letter of support from the county because that would strengthen their application. So we don't know yet necessarily what they're going to build. Sometimes they give some idea, sometimes not. But the question would be, depending on the size, I'm just trying to think through the problem solving here. So the question would be, would it be better for the county to offer a letter of support in the hopes that they get the funding, and then we can have the conversation about exactly what they're doing, but they may have already decided what they're doing. It may not be exactly what we want. Is it better to build out that area, or is it better to just wait and not offer the letter of support? They may not have as strong of an application. They may not get the money for that reason. They also could still get the money, and they wouldn't have included us at that point. So I'm just trying to decide the decision points. What I think is the best ideal is exactly what they're suggesting, which is we need to know, let's just say our choice is we want fiber every single place in the county. Any proposal that I get from someone to support a grant that says we'll build fiber somewhere, I would write a letter of support for, wherever that is. Does that make sense? But if they're saying I'm going to build wireless in these 5 areas, should I write a letter of support for that if there's no broadband there now? That's the question. Is that helping us or hurting us to do that? Yeah.
Rick, I want to make sure that Doug and I did not state something that you don't agree with. Was there anything that we stated regarding those RDOF funds and kind of a timeline that you'd like to correct or address? Make sure you do hit the button there in the middle until it lights. Here you go.
Yeah. His comment about Swiss cheese, in that case, I understand what he's talking about. There's some areas funded, some areas not funded. A wireless play does not know where those census blocks are. So we're obligated to serve all areas that we will get RDOF funding for, but the Swiss cheese portion where there is no RDOF funding, wireless isn't going to know that boundary. So those homes in between will still get served. Does that make sense? I appreciate both Sean and Doug talking about leveraging RDOF to get more funding. In the Connect Illinois grants, for example, there is heavy credibility to getting out-of-state funding and federal funding, both of which we can do and we are willing to do to the tune of 50% probably. So I just want to throw that on the table of whatever grant money we go for. We did fiber engineer the whole county, at least preliminary fiber. So the way the RDOF money, that was a reverse auction. So we engineered every county we bid on fiber and wireless. As the auction price, basically the lowest price wins, right? As the price came down and it made it unaffordable to, build fiber with the RDOF funds, then we fell back to wireless. Okay. We also have talked to the FCC where where appropriate, we can go back to the FCC and change the RDOF plan from wireless to fiber, which we are prepared to do. That answer everybody's questions?
Rick, I had one more, you talk about that in your area that you received RDOF, it's going to be a hybrid of fiber and wireless. I understand the fiber. Approximately how many poles or how many monopoles are you talking in that area to accomplish the hybrid side of things?
Yeah, so that's a good point. Some of the people are probably unaware, we did purchase, I think it was a Frontier warehouse up in Rantoul. That will be our fiber installation base of operations. Right now, it is housing 30 monopoles that will go on the Eastern Illinois electric substations. So we are moving forward with wireless broadband initially. And we will start plowing fiber or hanging fiber on poles. I'm not sure which they're doing yet to connect all those substations together. Initially, the substations will be connected with microwave links in between until the fiber gets built out. That's 500 miles, I think. We will connect up people along those paths. Obviously, those paths between substations aren't passing every home. But again, this is just, think of it as phase one. You know, phase one is wireless to get people service as quickly as possible. Phase two is going to be fiber. Fiber is the end all game. I agree with Doug and Sean. Is the funding available today? No. Is it coming? Yes.
A follow up on that, just to be clear, the 30 monopoles are for the entire Eastern Illini Electric
Yes.
Cooperative area.
There's about 15 in your county.
I was going to say, the Eastern Illini is much larger than Champaign
yeah.
County. So that's 30 total, but about 15 in the county.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Rick,
Brad, I would like to clarify one thing I said.
yes.
This is Doug. When they have the build out requirements, it's not at all clear how that applies. You know, so if they've won funding in 10 counties, you know, they could meet their requirement by doing 2 of them the first year, 2 the second year. And you could either be the first county or the last county. We're not sure how the FCC will apply that build out requirement. So that, you know, it's not guaranteed that you would get 20, 40, 80% in your county. So the FCC has not been clear on that. So it's going to be complicated. So
I will address that comment if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Rick.
Since we do have a partnership with Eastern Illini, we are committed to do this project as soon as possible. They want their substations up, and we are prepared to put those poles in the ground as soon as the ground's fit to get the heavy equipment out. So,
and that's the good answer. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
All right. So Rick, thanks for those comments. Let's kind of get back here to point number 1. Is there any other thoughts on point 1? What I'm hearing from Mike and from Doug and even Eric brought this point. It appears like we are not here to we're not ready to make a final decision on point 1, but maybe we've narrowed it to option A and option C, which are very similar, as Eric asked and Doug laid out. They're very similar, not identical, but have more similarities and differences. Are we sort of here in agreement that A and C, for the time being, for tonight, we should keep those as our options moving forward? I'm not asking for a motion. I'm just saying, do I see head shaking, thumbs up, etc. And again, that's not a vote. That's not our official position, but it is for tonight. That's where we're thinking is A and C. We've made a little progress. Okay, let's move on to number 2, because I think we can still discuss point 2 with the understanding that we're on 1A and 1C above. I think they still kind of fall into it. So you can see there, point two talks about the county basically developing another RFQ to provide, to reach out to providers to install, operate, maintain the broadband network in unserved and underserved parts of the county. You can see there, Darlene and Mary Ellen kind of laid out some things of how that might go about. Obviously, the Finley study would be shared, and I think Sean mentioned that at last meeting that that when that would be done, that would be, those providers would have a good base of information to utilize as they put together their plan. And that could be a good starting point for them. There would probably be a point scoring system with a number of factors, and that's, we will not get into all the factors tonight, but there would be a scoring system developed. You know, you would, and then you can kind of see, I'm not going to walk through A through I there. What are your thoughts on that approach of doing an RFQ to private providers to submit a plan of how they're going to get broadband to the parts of the Champaign County that are underserved and unserved?
This is Doug. Can I go first?
Yes.
Okay. I like the approach a lot. The one thing that I think you're going to not want to do in the RFQ level is the points, because the purpose, this is, again, remember, step by step. The first purpose is to try to get somebody interested in every part of the county, right? So one other county I'm working with has a very good approach. They're asking ISPs to give them a map of where they want to serve, and they're asking them what technology they want to use, all the questions you have listed here. They're also asking them, how much money do you want from us, the county? And then the county's going to take that, and the first thing they're going to do is if there's areas that nobody's asking for, they're going to come back to the ISPs, put them in a room and go, come on, guys, get your heads together and come back to us with a proposal between A, B, and C ISP to finish those gaps. And so, you know, a points scoring system picks winners. In the RFQ, I think your first goal is to make sure that there's at least one proposal for every area. And where the points come in, it would probably be a second document and or negotiations. It doesn't necessarily have to be another RFP, but you know, if 3 ISPs want to serve the same area, that's where you have to make decisions. But you can't really do points, because how are you going to compare an ISP who wants to serve the Northeast quadrant versus the Southwest quadrant? The points don't make any sense in comparing those two, because they're not talking about serving the same place. So I think your first goal is to get a map drawn, get them all on board, find out how much money they want. And now we're ready to talk about A versus C, right? Because now we have a map, we know how much money they're asking for, and we can have conversations about whether you can or cannot make that work under A or C. And then if many of them are asking to duplicate each other, then there's a scoring system. But I think I think you can't go there first, because we don't know what they want. So other than that, I think the approach is great. So.
Okay, Eric?
Thank you, Doug. That helps a lot. Speaking from a position of complete ignorance, are we really ready to put out something as tight as an RFQ? Are we really wanting an RFI at this point? Do we want to know what Doug just said? We want to know, are we going to get the whole county, RDOF or not? We want to know how the people who give us the whole county are going to do it. We want to know if all of them are willing to come in like ING and do wireless first, but with the plan to expand to fiber. And to Darlene's point, these letters of recommendation, that should be a caveat, I think, in it, that any company we recommend to join with when they ask for these letters of support has a plan that says they're going to upgrade, you know, to the final solution. With Mike, the very first meeting that Mike said was the real solution to all of this is fiber everywhere. So I think, you know, and Doug has said this before, we're a little, asking for people to give us hard numbers right now might be a little ahead of the game. I also agree with your points about the scoring. It's really an apple orange down by the river, up in the hills. Not that we have that many of either here in Champaign County, but I think we need to know as much as possible without asking for a formal quote right now. Just to know, are they willing to look for grant money? How much are they interested in us helping them in percentages, rough numbers? And where are they going to serve? I think where they're going to serve is a really important question, Doug.
And that would be an RFI. That's exactly correct, right?
Doug, can you refresh my memory? How many, and again, it's a map in your report, how many sections did you separate the county into? 7 or 8?
I think, yeah, it was either 7 or 8. I mean, I can go look here in a second, but yeah, it's, and we have detail within those. If somebody came and said, I want to do half of this section, Finley can give them numbers. If they draw a line on the map, Finley can give them the cost. So don't even worry about those lines. Those lines are really fiber serving areas. And so, but you could serve 1.5 of those with a proposal. Those are not cast in concrete. So it's more like draw lines on the map. And if an ISP really needs it, Finley can help them figure out how much money that is.
Okay.
It would be useful for us and the other ISPs in talking about this, though, if we used your 6 areas, because that gives us a real quick look at it. Have we covered all the right geography?
And we have those numbers by the 6 areas. It's not in the report, but that does exist, right? So because that's how they did their math, right? So yeah.
No, we have, I mean, Volo's here, they're doing some of the areas right now. They're not doing all of those areas, but they already have a beachhead in, say, area 1. They may say, okay, well, why don't we go do area 1? And somebody else may be interested in area 3. And if it'll never work out that perfectly, but if it did work out that perfectly, that we had 6 ISPs and 6 areas, and they all chose an area and said, that's what we'll do, we're done. But if we start drawing lines here, I'll go up to Route 30, but I won't go on the other side. Well, we already have lines you've created. Let's use your map.
Doug, again, what page is that on? Those that have the full copy.
Let's see here. That's in the engineering section.
Of course, I'm kidding, Doug, but if you wouldn't make the report 270 pages, we would all
Yeah, I know. Next time. That's on page 133.
I'm kidding, of course, Doug.
Yes.
It's page 132,
It's
right?
132. 132 is cleaner. Yeah. So 132 shows the sections of the county.
So the only caveat to that would be, as you know, when you try to draw lines, is that there could be a drainage district or there could be some other reason. There could be
Yes.
a division, which this might not exactly, but you're right. Most of the time, we could just use that to start with, and people could go over the line if there was a reason to.
I was wondering, while we have the ISPs here, can we just ask them quickly if it's feasible to keep these blocks and say, stay with this, or allow you some flexibility as far as the boundary?
Jason and Rick, you're more than welcome to answer that, but I agree, MC, while they're here, but I suspect your answer is going to be, as Rick said earlier, wireless in some cases where they're putting up 15 towers doesn't know the difference between area 1 and area 2, and will cross over. But guys, what are your thoughts on if that was a starting point for how to seek proposals? Would be based off of those. I think there are 6 or 7. 6. Rick? Or Jason?
So again, the question is it realistic for us to say, hey, stay within these boundaries, or should we, be more flexible with?
I was encouraged to hear Doug say that there is the data available on these 6 individual areas. I do know that we would be looking, from our perspective, not just one area per se, As Trustee Smelser said, we have beachheads in a couple of these areas, or starting to draft networks in those. With that being said, though, I mean, obviously, our participation would be paramount. So if it was decided that we wanted to stay within these established boundaries, we would work within that. But again, it would be very helpful, obviously, in development of the RFI to see the data that they've already extrapolated for those regions. And I know that probably didn't answer it entirely, but more data would be helpful.
We could include that data in the RFI.
Right, that could be included, right?
Understand our first commitment is to the FCC in the RDOF program, and our commitments and our obligations to serve those census blocks where hopefully we'll get authorized to use those RDOF funds. And again, our first phase is wireless, so yes, we would be going across the boundaries. But we are obligated to do so or we'll be penalized financially.
I think to summarize, MC, what I'm hearing from both of them is it would be a starting point. It may not be the final point that that's the area they might give us an RFI for, but it would be a good starting point, is what I'm sensing from both of them, that it's a place to start. It's not the finished area that they may propose, but it's a starting point. Continuing to stay on number 2 here, what other discussion points? Am I sensing then, again, maybe not final decision quite yet, but I'm sensing there is broad support for an RFI to address many of these A through I points, with the understanding that there's maybe 3 basic fundamental questions. There may be additional questions or information that we seek, but some of the fundamental information that we would want in an RFI here would be the plan to serve. Is it fiber? Is it wireless? Is it a hybrid? Whatever their project area is. The map of the area they were proposing to serve, starting with the 6 or 7 here, but understanding it may cross over. That would be kind of a second part of it, is map the service area you're proposing to serve. And then the third part of it is what type of dollars the project may be, with an initial idea of how much you would be seeking from the county. Am I summarizing where we've just been at the last few minutes with the RFI discussion? Again, there would be more questions, but those would be the 3 central ones that we would be seeking information on. Yes, Mike.
I have 2 questions probably for Doug that will help inform this. Doug, were your financial figures always assuming grant funding and therefore prevailing wage and Davis-Bacon and so forth?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I think I don't remember on the Davis-Bacon. We have numbers with and without Davis-Bacon. I don't remember which of those ended up in the report, because some grants require it and some don't. All grants don't require Davis-Bacon. The answer is we could give you that number for any area because it's just an adder. So
Yeah, because I think we would have to have that, because I'm sure all this state of Illinois is Davis-Bacon. I think the county is probably Davis-Bacon. Yeah, anything.
yeah, and it may all be Davis-Bacon. I don't remember sitting here. I have to go back and look. So yeah.
And the other thing is a CCG available to assist the county in the preparation of an RFI? If so.
Well, it would be a team of us and Finley, and I can't speak for Finley, but I'm almost positive the answer is yes. So yes. So I mean, I helped 6 other counties do almost the same RFI, so I would love to help you.
Thank you.
Other comments as around point 2 here, as we talk about an RFI? Again, have we gotten closer to what we're all thinking? By no further comments, I assume we're closer here on where, and we'll finish this up, keep moving here. The third section here is determine a range of a range of options for county contributions. I'll ask Eric, or not Eric, I'm sorry, Eric. I saw you walking out a second and my mind went that way. I will ask Kyle a minute. Kyle, can you give us where the county board is at in their budgetary process? And Darlene, maybe as well, either one of you, I should say, the county has an ARPA budget that we're currently within that time frame of that year. Can you give us an idea of what has been budgeted from ARPA for broadband and maybe some considerations the county board has unofficially for moving forward into the next fiscal year? And the last question, third part of that is, again, for either one of you, for those of us not familiar with government fiscal years, please give us that response as well.
Well, the county does operate on a calendar, like a January 1 is the first of our fiscal year. I know most units of government, usually it's July 1. Charlene, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think $3 million is what's budgeted for the current fiscal year. And then, microphone.
Yes, 3 million's budgeted through our 2022 budget, some of which is paying for the consulting time.
Mm-hmm. And and for the, as you mentioned, there's more unofficial recommendations that the board passed for the, looking at the entire picture of the ARPA funding, which was obviously going to go over multiple years. And I believe that where we landed at was around 10 million of what the county was looking at for ARPA funds for the entirety of the ARPA. I don't know if Darlene, do you recall exactly where that landed at?
The board didn't make an actual commitment for the second tranche of funds, which will be probably coming in June.
Yeah,
but they did say, I think there was consensus there could be more coming. I don't think an amount was decided on.
Right, and again, understanding we're in 2022.
Yeah.
Anything you say about next year is totally unofficial. Nothing has been
Yeah.
approved. I think both of you
And the board members did submit like questionnaire responses, and I think that I want to say most of the results, it was around somewhere between between maybe 7 and 12, or as far as what individual members are recommending. So that's what I would expect.
All right, so again, to summarize that basically in 2 sentences, 3 million for 2022 has been budgeted, minus the consultant fees for Doug and Sean and them. And unofficially, there's discussions of a total commitment over the both fiscal years of somewhere in the neighborhood of perhaps 10 to 12 million total, not additional on top of the 3, but total.
Yeah, and to clarify, the money will be received from the feds over 2 fiscal years, but the period that we're budgeting, it could be, obviously longer than that.
All right. So that kind of maybe gives us, I'm not saying that addresses everything right here in point number 3, but that maybe gives us an idea of where maybe a clearer picture, only slightly, because again, we're talking about a year 2 that hasn't been agreed to, that hasn't been proposed, that definitely has not been approved yet. So a lot of ifs and ands right there.
Or received.
Or received. I think that's a key point too, that this second installment has not been received of any funds. So perhaps this is a point that Mr. Smeltzer, Mike, that you can talk a little bit about some of the numbers you ran and how that incorporates some of the county dollars. I know those of you online, or I'm sorry, those of you here in person, Mike Smeltzer gave you a copy. And so those of you online, we'll see if we can get that shared with you so you can see it, correct? Or maybe? Okay. Okay, to clarify, it's not shared, it's on the county website. So, Mike, not, because again, we're up against the clock here tonight, but briefly, may perhaps talk a little bit about the document that you put together on your own as a member of the task force.
I was looking at a couple of things, and part of my motivation was based on bad information. So I'm glad to hear the 7 to 12 range, and that it's only 3 million this year. So that's good. But nothing's official, obviously. I wanted to look at the RDOF issue, and because again, I think we need to build everywhere. And so I ran those numbers. And I also, if these funds from the federal government get intermixed with state of Illinois broadband funds, that's a bad thing for us because the state of Illinois broadband is all bond-based. And bonds can't pay for electronics. Bonds only buy things that are durable, like conduits and fiber and manholes and towers, things that are going to last for 20 years or longer, because that's how long the bonds last. So I took out the electronics and just to see what a sort of effect that would have. But the good news is that if we were just doing the non-RDOF areas, and we worked with a formula that said we're going to get 75% from the federal government through the state. The ISPs would, either through IRUs or just through direct investment, one way or the other, end up providing 15% of the project cost and the county providing 10%. And I don't know if that's a fair breakdown of percentages, but it's a starting point. The total county cost would be about $5.5 million for doing the non-RDOF areas. If we add the RDOF areas to that, that bumps it up to about 12 million, which is in the ballpark of what we're talking about. So by playing with those formulas and what we ultimately put together as sooner or later, this will be an RFQ, and what we propose to the ISPs is we would say, okay, this is the formula we'd like you to use, or you can propose your own formula. But we know we're only going to get 75%. We need to raise 25% locally, and the county has X amount of money. Therefore, we need you to come up with. Oh, okay. There it is. What I was concerned about, and it was the bad information, was that 3 million was not going to be enough for any of these scenarios. But 7 to 12 million probably gets us through any one of a variety of these scenarios just fine, just maybe at the minimum on some of them, but nonetheless, it's enough money. So I'm not really concerned about that part. And if we have a way of including the RDOF recipients in our RFI, and it sounds like we're going to be there, and they can be at the table, that helps a lot. And they may come and say, all right, we only need the county to provide 5% of our funding to help us get over the hump between, to do fiber everywhere in our RDOF area. Who knows what that would look like, but that's for them to be creative, and that's what the RFI is for, to get those numbers. So there's no real high-level math here, just some subtractions and so forth, but the RDOF does make it confusing, and the bond funding issue in electronics gets messy. And hopefully, when this program comes out, this will be probably round 4 or 5 of the state program. It'll be total federal dollars, and we'll be able to buy whatever we need within the rules of the federal government. And the federal government does pay for electronics, or at least has in past broadband programs. So that's it. It's not particularly enlightening.
Well, thank you, Mike, for putting this together and putting your spin on it, or your input on it. I shouldn't say spin, but giving us some thoughts of perhaps a starting point in what in general we're realizing is, in broad terms, we could be close if the county gets to the number that is maybe being kicked around for next year in total. So it could be close of what we could need. I think as I reviewed point 3 as a whole, and I think this is where Doug and what we've realized as we've been sitting here tonight, so many decisions are ones built on the previous one or on the next one. What we're seeing is that what would give us a clearer picture on 3 of how much the county should contribute goes back to point number 2, when we ask in an RFI of how much they would like to have and kind of what they're going to be putting in and what they anticipate grant funds. So I think it's kind of one is dependent on the other or goes backwards, et cetera. It doesn't always build on it, but in this case, this one actually, in my opinion, goes back to point 2 when we talk about how much they're looking from the county, how much they believe they'll get in grants, and how much they'll put in their own skin in the game as the ISP. So to me, 3 is kind of hard to address. And then you add on top of that, and again, Sean spoke on this last meeting, the Beard grants haven't even officially been announced yet. Hopefully that opportunity is later this year. Perhaps, I think he said, maybe this summer, hopefully, but we haven't gotten that. And so that continues to add on top of the complication of how do we determine the amount of funds we really are suggesting for broadband from the ARPA side of things.
And one other thing I'd like to get back to, we heard a fairly compelling presentation from the Housing Authority a long time ago. And all of this report is kind of about rural Champaign County, which isn't the Housing Authority. There are some plans kicking around for ways of addressing the Housing Authority's needs. But they were going to require county funding to make that happen. I don't think either the city of Urbana or the city of Champaign at this point thinks it's their, they may contribute in some way, but you know, those are the negotiations that happen. But I think ultimately the Housing Authority is probably looking to the county board for maybe $1 million to get their system up and running where there would be ubiquitous broadband, or actually Wi-Fi, throughout all of their 25 odd facilities, however many there are, there's a lot. And that's a big project. The university is involved in that, and the university can supply a lot of expertise and some operational things going forward, but I don't think the university is going to fund the whole thing. Most of their funding would be in kind. And people are, Stephanie unfortunately is not here tonight, but, oh, you are. Aha, there you are. Stephanie, I don't know if you've talked to Tracy Smith about this recently. She was going to try and have a conversation with you about it. But I just don't want this group to forget about the Housing Authority.
Mike, this is Doug. I also want to jump in and say there is other federal grants that could actually address that specifically as well. There is money for exactly things like the housing broadband. So that might be, if you could get a lot of that money through that kind of a grant, that would be a really good jump start on that. So.
But there's going to be some local match out of any.
Yeah, there will be some local match, right?
And unfortunately, the state of Illinois right now requires a 50% local match, 50, on all of their broadband programs. So at some point, it almost, because they also bring Davis-Bacon to the table to, some ISPs that aren't used to paying prevailing wage, they shake their head and they go, this doesn't make sense for us to do this unless we have somebody else kicking in some money as well. So I think one way or the other, the county is going to be asked to come up with some matching funding, whether it's through this or some other program, but someplace down the line. But that's a priority for the county board to decide, not me, but I want to keep that on the table and at least in front of everybody. Stephanie, can you talk? Are you microphoned? Oh.
According to my screen, she is, but so Stephanie, if you've got comments or would like to share anything, you're more than welcome to, Stephanie. We'd again, brief comments about the Housing Authority. Mike is right. When the county board did hold their study session on broadband, I know Stephanie and her team were here and talked some about their needs, et cetera. And I know, Mike, when you also addressed the county board during the study session, you also brought up some points about the Housing Authority themselves. Stephanie, are you at a point where you can comment? If not, we can put this on like a future agenda. And I don't mean future like 6 months from now, I mean, the next meeting. And perhaps at that time that would work better for her.
I just wanted to make sure that Miss Stephanie, she's experiencing a death in the family. So, I know maybe she's missed some emails here and there, because she's not at work, but you said that there was a lady that was supposed to reach out to Miss Stephanie Burnett and make a connection?
Tracy Smith, she's working with Stephanie on some other projects as well, so they know each other and they communicate, I think, pretty regularly.
Okay,
But she was going to talk specifically about the broadband issue.
okay, great. Thank you.
Why don't, on that point, why don't we agree that we'll put that on our next meeting's agenda to make sure that's this particular point, a specific point to address is the housing authority and that angle or that portion of broadband. So why don't we set that aside for tonight and we'll put that on our next meeting agenda. What other discussion points around point 3 there? Do we have?
This is Doug. I just have one very quick one. You have to have a sidebar group of people working on 3D. And what other non-cash contributions can the county come up with? Because things like right-of-ways and all that stuff actually is very important to ISPs. And so that's a discussion that's very important to have.
Correct, Doug. Easements are pretty important, and that's a challenge out there.
Yep.
Darlene, did you have a comment to add to that, or?
I'm just giving the time here. It's 6:06.
So in other words, what Darlene's saying, we're down to 14 minutes. So how about this? Let's summarize a couple minutes here of where we've wrapped up. Let's stop with 3, and we're not going to get to 4 tonight. Let's kind of summarize what we've kind of come up with unofficially, tentatively, by the task force, and then let's talk about a next meeting again. So what
Brad,
might?
I'm sorry. I would like to say something about 4 because I think it's something I need to move forward on if we're going to do it, just in case. So number 4, I did do some checking further on. One of the things that Finley recommended, Sean recommended last time, is that if we move forward with any grant applications, we will need to do a statistically valid survey. I think if we're going to do that, we should get started on it. I do have an inquiry out to see whether the Regional Planning Commission is able to take that on right now. I'm just letting the board know that, or this committee know that, because I think if we're going to do that, it's something that's an upfront thing that we need to get done to write grants or to justify services, et cetera. I'm just throwing that out there. If you want me to move forward on it, I will. If not, I'll just wait till the next meeting.
Doug, a question for you, a follow-up on that, because that was in the report. How would you visualize doing it differently? How are you going to get more responses?
The problem in your county is the size. One, all your rural areas are not the same. And so the challenge is going to be to get answers that you can truly believe. So the way you do that is either one very large study that's large enough that we can believe the answer for all parts of the county, or 2 or 3, a north one, a south one, so that the answers are more granular. But the answer is that's just a process of how you do the survey question. The answer is, that's how you're going to get the firm answers. The number one thing ISPs want to know is how many people are going to buy it if we build it. That's what the surveys answer. And so that's a really important thing for everybody to know. So,
Darlene, I'll ask you the same question. If you were going to ask the Regional Planning Commission, the RPC, how are they going to get more responses?
Well, they would have to do a different strategy than just an online survey, which is what we did last time. It'd have to be a door-to-door, some kind of canvassing or some kind of public meetings. They'd have to add some pieces. So that would be, till they get to the numbers that are statistically significant, and they've covered all parts of the county, and they've tried to do what Sean was talking about is the random sampling is important, not just whoever responds to your online survey. You can't only take the responses that you get by somebody knowing somebody, or it has to be a truly random survey, so that I don't know exactly how they do it, but they would do like a whole block or a whole, randomly pick addresses or things like that.
Right. It has to be either telephone or door to door to match it. Right. So,
Because you have to be able to talk to people that wouldn't respond otherwise.
right.
Well, give me a range, Doug, of what you would consider statistically.
Believe it or not, it's not a giant number, probably in the range of, if we did, let's say we broke it into a north and south one, each one would probably need around 380 responses. As long as they were truly random, that gives you a 95% plus or minus 5% accuracy. To do the whole county might be 500, but again, I get a little worried there about understanding the differences between the different parts of the county. So, so you're looking at 500 to 800 responses.
Mike?
Darlene, do you know Mary Alice Wu from the Urbana City Council? He did the original survey work for UCDB 12 years ago through her organization that she works with. And that's the whole reason we got funded is we had a valid survey. I would tap her for some, or perhaps hire them to do it. I mean, they do work for hire for governmental units. Okay, but her outfit is very good.
Eric?
Yeah, I think Darlene's question to us on the broadband task force is, even though we're not going to do 4 tonight, some direction of whether to move to get this statistical survey going with RPC. And I think that, you know, as Mike says with UC, that this was critical for them to do things. I think we should agree to that one part of 4 now, is that we should start working on that survey. I think Doug has a good point to break it into areas because, you know, northwest and southeast part of the county are different. But to get those numbers as quick as we can, and whatever, you know, if we're meeting again in 2 weeks, but you can get 2 weeks to work on this ahead of that we're 2 weeks further along than we would have been. And I want to maintain our statistical advantage of everyone else and be this county that's ahead of everybody. So I like to finish things ahead of schedule and under budget. So that's just my opinion, but I think that we should let the executive office try to get this survey work moving because it's going to take some time.
It would also take some of the money from the broadband line item. I just want to be clear on that.
Darlene, what's your feeling? Do you feel the RPC, obviously you haven't heard back from them, but you have some experience with the RPC. Obviously, I'm not questioning their qualifications, but do you think they will have the time is what more I'm questioning? You have no idea, or?
I have no, that's why I sent the question out today, actually, to Rita, who would be responsible for that. They do community surveys a lot. I'm sure they have the expertise. I don't know whether they have the time and right now, the capacity to do it.
Right. I
So-
am not 1 second questioning
Yeah.
their ability or their expertise. I'm questioning a single thing,
Yeah.
their time.
Right. And if they don't, then if she says we are booked out through the end of summer, then we will probably have to issue an RFP because I'm imagining the cost would be higher than, we might just be able to get quotes. That's what I need to check into, but it takes time to do all those steps.
All right, folks, so let's talk about that then. Let's zero in on one thing here, 4C, which is the survey work. Are we in agreement, or does someone want to make a motion that we direct the executive to explore options with the RPC to begin the process of developing a community survey? I see head shaking. Darlene, is that enough direction, or you would prefer a formal motion? Okay. Correct. So, okay, we're all good on that. So Darlene, you will continue with that question or follow back up with them whenever appropriate if you don't hear back from them. And of course, you can share information with me and I'll get it out to the rest of the committee, et cetera.
One thing we might want to add to the survey is, especially for the rural areas, are you willing to cooperate in the use of the right-of-way along your property if we need to run fiber lines down the road, you know, in terms of helping us find your drainage tiles. And when ultimately this turns into a grant application, if we had 700 farmers that said, yes, I want to buy this service, and yes, I'm going to help make sure the fiber gets in the ground safely and all that, that would be very powerful, because that's one of the main obstacles to doing rural construction. So we might as well start thinking about, not only do you want the service, but are you willing to maybe do a little work to help make it happen?
Mike, I think there's a lot of merit to it because as many of us are well aware, and obviously the providers are well aware of the challenges with easements. I think there's a lot of question marks around that, and there's a lot of details within that. It's not, I think it's not just as simple as saying, would you be willing to let us go across your property? I think there is a ton of details within that of how are you going to treat my property as you go across it? Am I going to have access to it? There are some companies that will go across your property and no, we're not hooking you up. That's not an option. We just want to go across your property. Other companies will say, no, we'll actually offer you service if we go across your front yard. So there's 1,001 details within that. To me, I have nothing wrong with that question, but I think it's a tricky question for someone to answer blindly, not knowing a bunch about broadband and easements. But there is a seed that can be planted. So, all right, we are down to 4 minutes to finish this up. So we have settled on one thing officially tonight, but we have a clearer picture on a number of other fronts. So with that, what that means to me is we're going to have to meet again. We're not going to talk tonight of when that's going to be. My goal would be the same. I will work with Darlene and the staff to try to arrange a meeting in the next 7 to 14 days so that we can keep this momentum rolling, as Eric talked about, keeping ahead of everybody that is out there. So I will work with Darlene on dates and times. We will get it out to the committee as quickly as possible. Hopefully, today's Tuesday, hopefully later this week, Darlene is shaking her head that her and I can come to some options for later this week for our next meeting, again in the next week to 2 weeks. Any parting comments? That's a good point Darlene brings up. Doug, is there any other comments you would like to share? Because this will be, unless things change dramatically, this will be the last meeting we do over Zoom. Everything else will be in person. And so that means some of these folks, specifically Doug, who has addressed a number of points, will not be joining us in the future meetings because of his location, unless he's traveling into Illinois. Doug, is there any parting comments you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I will not be attending live meetings. I'm not traveling at all for health reasons. Yeah, one of the questions you asked us is Finley and us willing to help you? We'll get you a proposal of what that might look like for the RFI. So, yep.
That's a good point that Doug brought up, and that is that's buried in my mind in partly in point 4 is, but we did mention it earlier. I think Doug or Darlene mentioned it, maybe Mike, of the role of potentially Finley moving forward on another consulting agreement. Is there an option for that? And then Doug just clarified there is interest in it. And I know Sean has expressed interest in that moving forward as well, at another one to potentially help the county, whether that be with grant writing, helping Mary Ellen or her office, or helping with the RFI of what to ask for, or proper wording, or some of the things in 4. We'll have to save that for the next meeting. Any parting comments? We've got 1 minute. Thank you, everybody. Again, hopefully later this week, we will get another date or a choice of date for another meeting in the next 7 to 14 days. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.